I'm so happy to be with a historian. I have this question about something that really may have gotten lost in the crush of all the other crazy this week. But, we've just been through this moment where Donald Trump has come out and insisted on renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. And of course, there's some historical context. Decades ago, it was actually the Department of War before it ultimately became the Department of Defense. I'm sort of struggling here to figure out what the message is and if it's as in your face as I'm taking it for being. What do you make of that?
So a couple of things. First of all, the Department of War did not seamlessly become the Department of Defense. What happened is after World War II, the military has expanded dramatically, and there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of competition among the different branches to control different pieces of the military. Eisenhower is great reading on this, if anybody's an Eisenhower fan, because he's supposed to be making order of it all, and this is when he's still in the military. And he's just constantly mad at individuals, being like, so-and-so won't give up this, and so-and-so won't give up that. But anyway, what happens is, and I might get the dates wrong because I haven't looked at this in a while, but what happens is in 1947, as part of that reworking, they stop calling the military the Department of War, and they split the Department of War into the Department of the Army and the Department of the Air Force. Now, it's not a completely clean split, but they split that. They add in the Department of the Navy, and then all of them become the National Military Establishment. But the problem with calling them the National Military Establishment, I'm sorry, it's not funny, but it is kind of funny, is that the initials are NME, enemy. So I'm not making that up. So
That's amazing.
In 49, they changed it to the Department of Defense. But there's more going on with that, in that after World War II, there's this complete reworking of what the mission of a military should be, because they're trying to stop another world war. And by they, I mean the United States, but all of the allies in World War II. So they start to talk about the mission of the American military being to deter wars and for national security. And that's when they change it to the Department of Defense, with the idea that we will have this rules-based international order that will prevent wars rather than using might makes right all around the world. So there's that longer history, and that matters in this present because, in part, what is happening is that the Trump administration is, in fact, trying to destroy that rules-based international order. This is why we're siding with Putin. This is why we're, saying we're not going to get involved with anybody else's business unless only to mean we're not going to spread democracy. Otherwise, we're certainly happy to mess around in Germany, for example, supporting the AfD. So the radical right political party there. So partly that's what's going on. But here's why I wrote to you today about the Nazi political scientist Carl Schmitt. Because I've been reading pretty deeply in Carl Schmitt because of the fact that pretty clearly the Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance axis is involved with Carl Schmitt, who was a political philosopher coming out of World War I who ends up becoming a Nazi. And the reason that I wrote to you and asked about that actually has to do with the Department of War. Is any of this interesting, by the way?
Yeah, this is really interesting. Keep going.
Okay, because it's like, we just went from knitting to Nazi philosophers.
This is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. So even if nobody else is interested, I'm here for it.
So the issue for Schmitt was he didn't believe in liberal democracy. He's not growing up. He's coming of age in under the Weimar Republic, and he thinks it's going to fall apart. And he writes a lot of books about why things are going to fall apart, or a lot of writing of it, not always books about why it's going to fall apart. And that's sort of interesting. But the reason that I'm associating that with the Department of War is that he says that fundamentally politics is about friends and enemies. None of this balance of power crap that the Enlightenment thinkers cared about, none of this coming up with better ideas to move a country forward. He says it's friends and enemies. And what you need to use the state for is to defend your friends and crush your enemies.
How very Trumpian.
Well, but Department of War, crush your
Yeah.
enemies, right? And so, and there's more to it than that as well. I mean, he actually believes, or writes anyway, you can't ever say what somebody believes, but writes that he rejects liberal democracy because the idea of individual self-determination means that people are going to be at odds with each other. And so the state's never going to be that strong. True democracy, he says, is to wed the people directly to the government so that everybody's in agreement with the government, and those people who are not in agreement need to be purged. Those become enemies. So to go back to why call it the Department of War, first of all, it's easy to spell, which may be a benefit. Second of all, it does in fact talked about an earlier era when we get rid of the idea of a rules-based international order. But third, I kind of wonder if they are not putting in place this idea of friends and enemies all over our government, and using the power of the state to crush their enemies. And the other key piece of that, and of Schmidt's belief, is that is that enough on Schmidt?
Well, no, I mean, what I'm really interested in here, because you mentioned that Yarvin and Thiel and Vance, sort of that, that tripartite group of evil, that this is a philosopher that they've picked up on. And I wonder, is there a way of assessing how pervasive that influence is? Is it singular? Is it just part of just an entire sort of worldview that they're adopting that's very different from what the American paradigm was up until 5-10 years ago?
So, it's very hard to see how deeply something goes. A lot of the writers on the radical right read Schmidt and talk about him. It is not, I think, he's not, I think, a commonly known political philosopher in the United States in this period. He actually wasn't reprinted in the United States until, I think, 1970. The editions that are widely used are from the 1980s. But there is something about how ideas get into the water, and a lot of or the intellectual water. And a lot of what he is arguing seems to me to be in the water of this administration. So the other piece of him, and the reason that I was studying him, is not because of the friends and enemies thing, which is not at all unique to him. This goes all the way back in the United States to Nixon, who did this deliberately. He called it positive polarization. But because key to the idea of destabilizing constitutional government, according to Schmidt, is to control the exceptions. That is, when there is an emergency, for example, a true sovereign, the person who can run everything, takes control of that situation and uses it to usurp the powers of the democracy and to take them himself. Well, look how Trump is governed, with emergencies. So that's why I was looking at it.